Everyone. Hi, Vix. How are you?
Hi. Oh yeah, I'm trying not to just say good. An undescriptive word. Yeah, I'm hot and excited and oh yeah, a little nervous now we've gone live.
Oh, yeah, I sympathize especially with the letter because when I first started doing this, I was so excited that the nerves didn't come through. But
Mm.
now that I'm kind of like, now this has set basically as a weekly routine. So my brain has the time to be nervous
Oh
about
yeah,
doing the conversation. And I think for the past 2 or 3 times, I have literally felt anxiety before jumping here on the call,
yeah.
even though it's the highlight of my week. But now it's just like, oh, but it's happening, and yeah, now kind of the anxiety outweighs the excitement. Sadly,
That makes me want to like just take a breath and be like, okay, we're here, we're live, it's all good.
it's all good. Yeah, it's just like meeting for coffee. Even though I think you have tea, I have Coke, which is not the healthiest thing, but it's.
Yeah, I might live in Bali now, but I have not been able to give up the tea drinking as a Brit.
Do you manage to get good quality teas there?
Uh, yes, there's some really lovely like proper tea shops here, and in
Mhm.
fact,
Nice.
my partner just bought us a ceremonial tea set,
Oh,
so that we can he has this desire for us to slow down and we practice things like authentic relating together. So to do that
yeah.
over tea, so we have like really high quality tea, and then it's pretty rubbish tea. It's one of the things I really miss about London is what I would define as a proper British cup of
Yeah,
tea.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But if anything, either when you'll be visiting London again or when someone will be visiting you, you can carry a suitcase full of properties back to
Exactly, exactly.
them. So, Vix, can you tell all of us who are you, what do you do, how did you end up doing what you do now, which I think is like the question always.
Yeah, it was an interesting story. I think it's interesting. So I am a somatic coach. I'm an authentic relating facilitator. I'm a cyclical living geek, and I'm a recovering perfectionist. So those are, I guess, my job titles and how I describe myself in the world. Um, how I got here. So I started off in the Royal Air Force. I spent 10 years as a military intelligence officer
Mm.
in lots of places you probably wouldn't want to go on holiday to. I left, oh, what are we now? I guess 7 or so years ago, at 31, with that kind of, without much of a plan other than I think there's something else I'm meant to be doing kind
Mm.
of idea. So left, ended up working in the international development sector. So spent time in Bangladesh, Beirut, and then back in London, kind of managing programs, particularly around gender and security. I burnt out, pushed myself way too hard, and maybe that's something we can kind of touch on a little bit.
Mm.
Uh, I would now recognize that as being a lot of my perfectionist patterns kind of kicking in
Mm.
in a way that I wasn't aware of. And so after I burnt out, I decided to leave my job. I was training to be a yoga teacher and had some random idea that I would combine consultancy with teaching yoga. And the last sort of 4 years or so saw me train to be a coach, train to be a somatic coach, discover authentic relating, and yeah, leave London, move to Bali, get married. So now, yeah, I live out here. I work, I coach and kind of facilitate nearly full time. Still do a little bit of consultancy work here and there where it feels exciting. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what 16 years in 2 minutes.
Wow, that is a good nutshell, though. I'm I'm really inspired by your story, all from like being in the Royal Air Force and doing everything that you did, especially in a high stress environment as you were living, and not only living but being and experiencing everything. I'm curious to hear from you, looking back now.
Mhm.
You, like you said that you've just like on the almost like the last stages of your, let's say, traditional career, your older career, you felt like you were experiencing burnout. But
Mhm.
did you recognize some like smaller hints from when you started working that then just kind of contributed and started to pile up by that point, that then you were like, oh, this is burnout?
Mm. Not really. So I think what happened for me is that I had developed certain kind of coping and working strategies that were really appropriate for the Air Force
Yeah,
and for the kind of support that I had and the kind of the cadence and rhythm of being in the military.
yeah,
And what I found was when I was sort of when I uprooted myself from that environment, and my father had been in the Air Force, so when I left in my early 30s, being in the Air Force was all I had ever really known, apart from a
yeah,
couple of years at university. So when I kind of uprooted myself and kind of went to work in the international development sector, a lot of the kind of this implicit support mechanisms that I'd had weren't there anymore. So in the Air Force, I had been one of many junior officers at my level and in my specialisation.
mm-hmm.
Whereas the company I went to work for was very small. I was the youngest person on the senior leadership team and the only person who wasn't a sort of a technical specialist. So my job was around operations. One of those jobs where I got to do project management. So all of the stuff that nobody else wanted to do ended up on my portfolio. And I was the kind of person who would keep saying yes to all of those things, like, oh, this needs fixing, that needs doing. Okay, take all of these tasks on without the ability to kind of, I couldn't measure what good looked like anymore because I didn't have a peer group. And so in my perfectionist brain, I assumed that therefore it wasn't good enough. So
Yeah,
doing more and more and more, found myself, and it happened quite gradually over a few
mm-hmm.
months. Suddenly I became too busy for a lunch break. And I was working long hours, and I was starting to go into the office at the weekend, and this just kind of like cumulative effect. And I only started to appreciate that there might be something wrong when I was working with a coach who invited me through work. We had like a 3-hour in-person session, and at the end she asked me how stressed I thought I was. And I paused and I thought about it. And said, I don't know, maybe like a 4 or 5 out of 10. And she looked at me and said, Vix, you've been in tears for this entire session. Do you maybe want to reconsider your answer? And I was like, it actually blew my mind. Suddenly I was like, oh, wow, you mean that what, crying in the toilets and having panic attacks at work every day isn't normal? And it was her intervention, and she suggested that I called my doctor, which I did. And like in the UK, if you call your doctor, you get through to the reception. And whatever I said had obviously triggered a little flow, because within 10 minutes I got a phone call back from my doctor asking if I was at risk of hurting myself or hurting somebody else.
Oh wow.
Whatever I had said had clearly like rung some alarm bells, and I got signed off work for a few weeks pretty much straight away. So yeah, it was actually quite a shock to me.
Yeah.
And I remember my predominant feeling was one of I was confused, because on the outside my life looked great. Like I had all of the things that I was meant to want, right? I was, how old would I have been at this point? I don't know, like 33. I had 34. I just bought a flat in London. I had this great job. I had a boyfriend, living this wonderful life, and I was like, this is everything I wanted. So why am I not happy? Yeah, so it prompted a big sort of rethink. like, what the hell am I doing in my life? Because I didn't leave what had been a successful career in the Air Force to be sick and unhappy and like, just miserable on this, you know, outwardly wonderful life.
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of your words, and I feel them really deep down in my soul. And I think that a lot of a lot of people listening to what you just said will kind of, go back in their own thoughts. It's possible that I'm in this stage of their journey and then kind of, be able to recognize and become self-aware on where they are now and where they're going, almost like a wake-up call of sorts, because it's really, really hard. And I know, because I'm the same, where now I'm becoming a bit better of recognizing when I start falling into that default that I was that I'm used to. Usually I recognize it just before it's late, like the last possible second, the last possible minute or second depends on my mental state that day. And I'm something you said really stood out and stuck with me, is that moment where you kind of started embodying that belief that nothing you do is ever good enough, where you started working long hours, having lunch breaks, and all of those things. And what interests me now is, because you basically work alone, and I think that for a lot of people who are either working for themselves or now working from home without that external kind of more frequent peer talks and validation and stuff like that, how do you manage yourself not to go back to that default state of I do is good enough, because I'm like, because you generally get less feedback than you would in a project with the whole team versus when you work for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk about some practical things that I do. One thing I really want to name is that I've done quite a lot of therapy since that time, including some specific trauma work. And that has made a huge difference to me. And I don't want to kind of underplay the importance of getting that kind of professional help. So, I can talk about kind of like practical coaching strategies and things that I use. But for me, like trauma therapy work in particular, really, really helped me. So I feel this pattern of perfectionism is one of nervous system dysregulation. So for me, it has tended to be, I move into like hyper arousal, this kind of fight or flight. So I kind of like come up and out of my body a bit forward focused. Everything gets I'm like a little bit hyper vigilant and gotta control everything. For other people, and I get this occasionally myself, it's more of like this kind of freeze collapse response of like, oh, it's hopeless. Like there's no point me even attempting something because it's going to be rubbish anyway. So why would I even bother? I'm just going to go back and crawl under the duvet.
Yeah.
And so for me, trauma therapy work particularly has helped, if those two states are having like the accelerator or the brake stuck on, trauma therapy has helped me expand my window of tolerance for sure. And then how do I manage that? So firstly, I think it's like you said, it's like recognizing those patterns in myself. So I'm much quicker now to notice, even at the end of a day, if I've kind of pushed myself too hard. Whereas before it would be like weeks or months before I realized that. So embodied self-awareness, like understanding myself and how I am, makes a huge difference. Cyclical living. So for me, particularly with my menstrual cycle, having this kind of rhythm to my month where like I'm just coming to the end of my bleed now, and I took the whole of the weekend off. Like genuinely did nothing, saw nobody, really got to relax, then had to go and teach for 2 days, but then took yesterday off. So like really making sure that this is a time where I rest and restore myself so that I can go again. So having this kind of rhythm of, you know, because in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Ovulating Vix is like seriously ready to take over the world. And if I let her schedule my diary, bleeding Vix kind of dies in a little heap because it's all too much. So but recognizing that in myself, like I have this kind of rhythm and these different like energy patterns that I can work with rather than expecting myself to be on all of the time. Being brutally realistic with my to-do list. So what I'll tend to do is plan out, you know, the things I would like to get done in the week, and then a lot of this is like feelings based. So I've really moved away from this kind of like intellectual logic. Okay, well, it has to look like this all the time, and it's much more about like what does it feel like. So I was pretty stressed last week. I'd been away for the weekend, came back, knew that I was going into my bleed, knew that I was doing this 2-person in-day training. It's like, oh my God, I've got so much to do. And so I went back to my to-do list and I was like, I just kept taking stuff off it until I felt like the level of internal pressure dropped to a place that felt manageable again. And I wish I could explain like exactly how I've been able to get to a place where that feels okay. Like I said, a lot of therapy, a lot of practice.
Yeah.
But that's the key indicator for me. It's like I don't like feeling stressed and burnt out and on the edge all the time. I don't like how I am with my partner. I don't like how I talk to myself. I don't like the way that I eat in those times. I feel better when I allow myself to feel a little bit more ease. And that doesn't mean that everything is easier all the time or easy. But there's a sense of, you know what, it's all going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, I make a big deal out of it. Nobody's going to notice if my newsletter doesn't go out today.
Yeah.
Or even this way. I mean, maybe there'll be like 3 people who are waiting for it. But most people will be like, oh, okay, cool, it will come next week. Like, you know, as much as these things feel like a big deal to me, I think the more objective I can be about them, that's really helping. So, yeah, there's a few things.
Definitely. And I think that kindness and being gentle towards yourself, which I definitely am still learning, and also through a lot of therapy. I'm like, for me, it's a mix of trauma therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, and basically everything that on a given week I need or that I feel the most pressure of. And this tune, the notification got me outside of my train of thought. What was I saying? Yeah, so learning how to be gentle with myself is something that has been the most difficult, but also the most gratifying thing at the same time. Because before, if I didn't accomplish everything I wanted in my mind in that given week, I will feel like I will feel awful. And then the negative self-talk will kick in because I didn't do all of the things that I wanted to do. Even though, as you said, like it can be, oh, I didn't publish a newsletter today and I have it in my schedule that it's always on Thursdays. And the amount of pressure and negativity I was putting on myself, then basically it made me start resenting everything that I was doing because I am cultivating a negative emotion that I am directly associating with my work, which is the last thing that I want to do. But I found myself constantly being in those kinds of, finding myself in those kind of situations and with those thoughts. And just as of recent, I really started exercising that thought of it will still be there tomorrow. Like the world will not collapse if I don't do this today, and if I give myself and my brain and my body and my soul the time and the space that they need to recover from whatever it is that's pressuring me, because sometimes I can't even gauge what's stirring up the emotions from the inside, because it takes a couple of hours or a couple of days for me to recognize what's brewing and why. So yeah, I'm for me working with how my energy levels are versus working with how many tasks I have to do has been something that has really helped me, and that has shown me in the last couple of months that I'm still going forward. And even more so, I'm possibly going even faster now, kind of looking back, even though it's not the goal, but I feel like I am moving forward more organically, quicker than I did before, because all of those negative things, the negative connotations, were only holding me back. And even on the days that I managed to show up to work, I would do less because I was constantly nagging myself in my head and being like, this was supposed to be done yesterday. And then, like, that takes a lot of brain power.
Well, I really resonate with what you're saying. So let me take that in reverse order. So firstly, for me, I've realized that working like this gives me more energy because I am no longer fighting myself. I'm no longer spending all of the time paddling upstream. And so like when I need to rest, and it's still hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I said to my partner, and it was a Saturday. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so lazy. And he was like, babe, it's Saturday. Like, you know, you're like, oh yeah, okay, no, I'm not lazy, I'm resting. So like these thoughts still come up. But I've noticed that the more I work with my energy rather than against it, the more energy it gives me.
Yeah.
But then these things are also like they take practice. You know, I had spent 35 years practicing one way of being because it really worked for me for a long time. This kind of like on-driven, focused perfectionist strategy had worked for me for a really long time. And I had never really had to learn how to do anything another way. So taking some time to practice and experiment and learn to show up in a different way took time, and like I had to kind of prove it to myself. And like you were saying about going faster, it's hard to measure kind of speed of progress. But one thing I notice is that I feel more creative. The more I get into stressed, panicked, kind of like tight and focused mode, the more like my creative problem solving brain goes offline, and the only thing I can see is the thing in front of me. And there are times that's really helpful, but actually most of the times, like doing the kind of work that I'm doing, you know, I mean, coaching particularly, but, you know, designing new programs, kind of, you know, writing content, designing trainings and things like that. I need to be like peripheral vision, like I need to be able to see the options and kind of be more creative. And you know what? Even if I wasn't making any more progress, even if I was doing worse, it feels better. Like, I enjoy life more. Like one of them, when I burnt out. So I had when I left the Air Force, I had a mantra. And I had this mantra that I wanted to collect experiences, stories, not stuff. Was my mantra when I left the Air Force, and that helped me make kind of decisions as I was navigating my career. And then when I burnt out, I came up with another one, which was that I wanted to live a life that I didn't need a holiday from. And what that meant to me was like I wanted to stop living for the weekend. You know, I wanted to stop kind of pushing myself to collapse at the weekend or to collapse like the next time I had some annual leave. But also that like life had this kind of quality of adventure and holiday. And so like that's still like what I feel like I want life to feel like that. I don't want to be kind of just like counting down the days or hours until I get to like stop. Like this is the only life that I get, and I would quite like to enjoy it. So yeah, for me, it's been mostly a way to figure out how can I do things that I really love and really enjoy in a way that feels good most of the time.
Yeah, it's a similar journey I started almost 2 years ago now, but more realistically a year and a half ago, because for the first 6 months when I burnt out, I was a vegetable. I couldn't I couldn't think. I was there to sleep, eat, and repeat that cycle, and occasionally walk my dog. Like I say to my partner, if we didn't have a dog in those 6 months, I will have never left the apartment.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know that every time when I get in those kind of situations and episodes, I'm like, I just want to sit. I just change between the couch and the bed depending on the time of day,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much it. So now, like, at least having the dog help with me getting out and being in the sunshine and in the greenery and feeling the earth and the ground beneath my feet, and be like, I feel like I'm just like practicing that feeling of I feel grounded because I have, like um,
Mm.
space underneath my feet. It's something that really helped me, because at that time it was so the kind of the thing that pushed me over the edge with everything else that was going on in my life at that time was, so it was late March of 2020, and on a Saturday evening, like probably like 6 p.m., we had an announcement that we are going into strict lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
6 a.m. the next morning, we had an earthquake, and it also started snowing.
Wow.
So in the middle of like that uncertainty that you can't go outside because it's not safe, because we still don't know what this virus is and what it can do and all of these things. I didn't feel it safe at home because my home was shaking and the
Mm.
ground was shaking, and it was something that just really tipped me over the edge. I felt like just like the ground beneath me just like went whee, and I started falling, and I didn't stop. It was really long experience of just not having control. And for someone who had always the plan A, B, C, D, and all the way to Z, not having any of those plans, and everything that I knew changed basically overnight,
Mm-hmm.
I've completely lost it. And throughout those 6 months, basically like mental recovery, I said to myself, on like something along the very similar lines of what you've just said, which is I've I want to live a life that enables me to enjoy every single day and not constantly feel pressured, and that reminds me that I wanted to separate me feeling my worthiness and my values as towards my academic and work performances, which has been the common denominator for the first 25 or 6 years of my life. And when the earthquake hit, which was also when I first added, I was on extended leave from my work. And then afterwards, when I kind of recollected myself, I quit my job. But at that time, for the first time ever, I wasn't working and I wasn't studying. So two big
Mm-hmm.
parts of my identity were completely gone. And basically, at that moment, I had no idea who I was, because my entire life I was always building that kind of, let's say, outer walls of things I'm doing as a person. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at maths, languages, like foreign languages, consultancy, like, all of these things that I had a lot of achievements at, or I had a lot of obligations with. I was always in a new language class or something. Then with all of that stripped away from me, like I was almost like, I felt like for the first time ever, someone painted my walls not with the graffiti, but just like with bare paint. And nothing was there. And that meant that for the first time ever in my life, I had the time and the space to literally not do anything, which felt so scary. Because before, my days were filled from 6 a.m. until like midnight or 1 a.m. for the sole purpose of me not having the time to think about anything and to question everything what I was doing before. So I intentionally constructed that coping mechanism, that hamster wheel, basically. And I didn't want to step off from it because I was afraid of what will happen once I do, because it was keeping me in the momentum, and I thought, fuck, once I come off, I'll just like I'll roll over in a puddle or something, and I'll have no idea what's going to happen to me. But I kind of used that opportunity back with kind of having, okay, so I have enough savings. I don't have to worry about I don't have anything other than the pandemic that's kind of directly impacting my life or making me feel like I'm in danger, other than myself and my own thoughts. So I set out to be on a journey where, for the first time since I've known myself, basically, I stopped and then let everything I was basically running away from all of these years catch up with me. And now I'm, like as we're kind of slightly, like as we're having us like a very slow walk together, I'm chatting with all of those kind of characters and things and situations, and kind of like trying to get to a point where they all walk or run or whatever will be later in life next to me, not in front of me, so that I kind of can't see and can't walk my way where I want to, not behind me so that I can't see them, but that I always have a feeling that something's coming after me, and then it's very unpleasant, but next to me, because I feel that all of those things at the end of the day made me who I am today. And without them, I'm stripping pieces of myself that are integral for me. But my experience now and what I'm trying to accomplish now is accepting all of them instead of putting them like in a backpack somewhere and then shoving them under my bed and be like, don't ever come out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, that thing about acceptance. So in authentic relating, we talk about this idea of welcoming everything. Welcoming everything doesn't mean that we have to tolerate, unhealthy or unsafe situations or people in our lives. There's a sense of orientating towards reality. All of this is part of me, and all of this is, some of these things kind of, go to extremes, becoming incredibly like overdeveloped strengths in my view. They're all like really normal parts of being human. Yeah. And like the idea that we can somehow, like take off imposter syndrome or perfectionism. You say, like we're just kind of like getting rid of old receipts at the bottom of a handbag. It's such a myth. And, I think the more that we push these parts into our shadow, if you go into sort of Jungian psychology, the more these things go into the shadow and into the unconscious, they run us from the unconscious. So my work is like, how do we start to bring this stuff into conscious awareness? So either through relating practices, through embodied practices, how do we start to kind of make the implicit stories and assumptions and patterns that we have, how do we make them explicit and conscious? Because when they're there, we can start to do something with them. And we can say, okay, great, like I can love all these parts of myself, they're all part of me, and I might want to start to be able to choose to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
I can love the part of me that's a perfectionist and that's an overachiever and that's a control freak. And I can say, you know what, at 38, I don't want that to run my life anymore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
those patterns go back like at least 30 years for me. Like, I don't want to be run by the 8-year-old version of me. That's not appropriate anymore. Like, the things that happened to me when I was 8 are not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So how can I look after that part of me? How can I kind of respect and honor how that served me for all of these years, and then say, okay, now I'm ready to learn how to do something else. I'm ready to show up in a way that feels more appropriate for who I am now and where I am now in my life.
And how do you start doing just that? Figuring out what is that new thing that's going to help serve you more than all of these mechanisms and strategies that served you so far.
Yeah, so when I do this with embodied clients, sometimes we play with contrast. So for a lot of people, if I was to ask you to like exaggerate, if I was asking you to show me the body of burnout or perfectionism or whatever it is, so for me, I said like my perfectionism tends to be up, out, forward, tense, like this kind of body.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I like to be able to do instead, well, I want to be able to do the opposite, which is not necessarily collapse, but it's like, okay, can I find a place in my body where I feel relaxed and alert?
Mm.
And so I would work with a client to like find like where does that live in your body? What does that feel like? So sometimes it's about contrast. Like it's amazing. Even people that have not had a huge amount of embodied practice before, if I ask them this kind of question, instinctively know. Like our embodied wisdom, something in us knows the answer to these questions, and if we can only pause our heads for long enough. So often I'll say to a client, where do you do this in your body? And ask your body, not your brain. So
Yeah.
allow your brain to be confused and to not know what the answer is for a moment. What does your body have to say? People know. It's remarkable.
Mm.
And so so I like to start this embodied approach, so from the body upwards. So cultivating the feeling in the body rather than the kind of the classic intellectual way that most of us, or I learned to be, of like, okay, well, what do I need to do, and and like, how do I need to think? Because it's quite hard to change our thoughts. It's quite hard to grow new neural pathways or to switch old neural pathways off. It's much easier because our bodies are these tangible things that we can touch and see and feel. Like, I can notice when I'm here compared to when I'm here, and I can literally feel the back of my body against my chair.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I kind of like track myself now when I'm doing calls like this is, can I still feel my body on the chair?
Mm.
If I can't, that's a reminder for me to be like, okay, I can come back. It's all right.
Yeah.
I can do things from here too. So yeah, for me, like working through the body has given me a whole and access to a whole other way of working, whole other intelligence that I was just ignoring when I was kind of brain down, intellectualizing everything all of the time.
Yeah. That's something that I'm um, unintentionally learning, or rather kind of realizing with myself now as I try to not necessarily distance myself from my brain and from the intelligence, but just be playful and be creative with other ways of working and being. And I know that, for example, today, because our network was down for 2 days, I didn't manage to get a lot of things done, which I then used to just rest and do nothing, because what can you do without the internet? So I was just like outside or playing, or yesterday afternoon I took a nap, which I thought was 20 minutes, but it was 2.5 hours. But yeah, it was nice. And then today, this morning, I woke up. First of all, I couldn't sleep really well because my brain was piling up with all of the things I was meant to be doing, that I planned to be doing yesterday and the day before, that I couldn't, because now I was like thinking, oh, if the networks, if the Wi-Fi starts working again, I'm having a really full-on day, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that. In a way, I felt that overwhelm, which you mentioned earlier in the conversation, where it just didn't feel manageable, and then I find myself being like really frazzled, not knowing what I want to drink or eat or listen to. It's just like, it's when all of my systems are on alert, then it's like no one knows what you're doing anyway. And I kept then reminding myself, especially now before our talk, to kind of offload, kind of almost like shut down or mute everything that's happening here, and just check in what's happening in my body, and start showing up and acting from the inside and how I feel, because it's a really sunny day and I really love my top and I'm really in a good mood, but everything here was making all of this go like being totally deaf and not showing up. So I'm working on exercising that muscle, that instead of what you said, kind of going top down, I go bottom up. And because even then, I realized just with how much more ease and lightness and gratitude I have my days, even if I work for 6 or 8 or 10 hours, if my creative flow is there in a day, if I'm doing that from here instead of from just a place of my kind of mental intelligence, it's a very different feeling, because over here it's always over here are those old pathways that I've learned and integrated, which are, you are not doing enough, you're not doing good enough, you're not like, it's everything is predominantly negative, whereas from inside I am trying to facilitate a predominantly positive experience and something that I truly deeply believe about myself. And then that shows up in my work, and then it makes everything feel lighter. I don't want to say easier, because the work isn't necessarily easy, but it feels easier, or rather lighter, because I'm showing up that space where it's like, this is not an issue, because we can handle this, because I believe that we can handle this.
Yeah. I noticed that I want to kind of make a little bit of defense of intellect, and I think it's not to damn intellect. You know, the way that our brains work is incredibly important, and intellect and learning and problem solving and all of those things. But I think if we let our brains run the show, we're just missing out on all of this. You know, Lisa Feldman Barrett likes to talk, she's a neuroscientist, talks about the fact that our brains are locked away in these bony boxes in our skulls. And actually the only way our brain can process what's happening in the world around us to ourselves is through our bodies. We experience everything through our bodies and through our senses. And if we're not connected to that, if we're not paying attention to these kind of quite subtle cues sometimes, then we're missing out on this huge wealth of intelligence. So for me, it's the more I can marry both, and it's a practice. You know, like some days I really get this, and I feel like I'm really on top of it, and other days it's a real slog. You know, so even today I've had lots of kind of like back-to-back calls for a consultancy project I'm working on. And I was journaling this morning and just been like, oh God, I've got so, already like my brain was starting to fire at 100 miles per hour. It's like, oh my God, I've got so much to do. I'm like, okay, well, how do I want to feel today? I want to feel like, I still want to feel slow. Like I'm still bleeding. I'm not ready to go fast yet. It's like, okay, how could I do slow more today? Okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to journal for 5 more minutes. So my thing today has been like, how can I keep slowing down? And every time I've noticed that I've started to get a little bit more stressed, everything speeds up for me. Like I talk a little bit faster, I move faster, And so rather than just telling myself slow down, if I can slow down my body movements, so even something similar like how I eat my dinner or how I move in rooms, that like I start to cultivate a feeling of slowness and everything. You know, suddenly my day has felt a little more spacious.
Yeah.
You know? And it's I think that's what your makes sense of lightness. For me, it feels quite. It's like I have room to move. I feel when I get this right, I feel like a goalkeeper. You know, like I'm responsive. So, oh, okay, the ball's going that way. Great, I can be there, or I can be over here. Whereas when I get stressed and tight, everything's constricted. Like I can't move. It's everything's really rigid and hard, and it's that kind of hardness that I'm a little bit over.
Yeah, that visual really works for me as well, because how I feel is like in that position of not being able to move, it feels like there are 10 football balls coming at my direction, and
Yeah.
I can't do because I don't know which one to try to hit first, knowing that there's no possible way that I can hit all 10 of them, because that's just impossible. So then I'm just like, I just freeze and I don't do anything other than feel, oh my God, so many things are happening and I don't know which one to start with first. Yeah, and that was something that definitely showed up this morning, for me, where I literally managed. It was an interesting experience, because cultivating this self-awareness is something new for me. And this morning, I literally felt as almost as a passive observer of what's happening inside my own mind, because I recognized what's going on, and then I managed to be like, we're not doing this today, because that's not how we want to feel. And you can just prioritize and down downgrade what you need to accomplish today, because you can still do it tomorrow or the next week or whenever, because there's always time. I always felt in my life, I don't know if you can relate, that I'm really late for stuff. And my friends used to get really annoyed with me, because just before the pandemic hit, my dream was to move to Sydney and have study my PhD over there. And I was constantly just like kind of being very, very annoying with, oh my God, I need to, like, we need to move there now, because I'll be 26 or 27 or 28, because the time constantly was moving, and I won't make it. I never knew to where or what I will not make if I don't get there on time, whatever on time meant. But that idea of me failing and disappointing myself if I don't do certain things by a certain date, was really, it was all I could think about for a very, very long time, because I've had, sometimes I felt like throughout the breadth and the depth of my lived experiences, whether the traumatic ones or the accomplishments, I have had so many that some people don't have, like in 3 lives of theirs. And for me, that speeds up that scale of what other things I'm supposed to be achieving and doing, because I've shown that I'm really resilient, and then that means that I need to, like, elevate it on another level and then do the same thing, just on a higher level from now on, and each new accomplishment raises the bar. But the trick is that I kind of realized in all of these um, self-questioning and thoughts, and trying to figure out what I am doing with my life and what I was doing with my life, is that there is no end level, there's no end bar. And what I was doing all the time was I was always looking up and never reflecting on what I already accomplished, because I will be like near the finish line of one thing, I was already thinking about
Mm.
the next two things. And now it feels like for all of those things that I did live through and I did accomplish, it just feels like someone has written on the document my name and surname and be like, this is what you've done. And I can't even, because I wasn't present in that moment then and
Mm.
there. I was already thinking about the future and already thinking about new things that now I'm completely disassociated from whatever was back here.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I can relate a lot to what you're saying, especially that idea of, you know, barely having one thing finished before I'm on to the next. Yeah, that's something there's interesting you talk about, sort of like not enough time. I think I shared something on Instagram about this last week, where I was having this sense of like, oh my God, there's not enough time. I've got all these things to do, not enough time. And a friend reminded me of this concept of Einstein time, which Gay Hendricks talks about in The Big Leap. This idea that time is relative, you know, and it really depends on our experience. Or, you know, if you put your hand on a hot stove for a minute, or you're holding a plank pose or something, you know, a minute, it could be a really long time sometimes. And then spend an afternoon with a loved one, and hours can go by without you noticing, really. And so time is, you know, our experience of time is relative. And there's something that you said about, I think the more that we can slow down, and what I mean by that is the more that we can be present to what is happening in the moment and to feel it, like to feel it in our bodies, to feel all of the emotions, like the full range of human experience. That, I mean, for me, that's what a rich, a full life, a fulfilling life means, is to feel full of emotion. And so if we can slow down enough to actually appreciate what we're feeling in the moment, that has very much changed my relationship with time. Yeah, and you know, and some of those things still come up for me. So, you know, I'm 38, and my partner and I are trying to get pregnant at the moment, and there's a part of me that's like, oh, maybe there's not enough time. Maybe I've left it too late. You know, I remember doing my master's degree at 28. I was like, oh yeah, I'll definitely have a PhD by the time I'm 40. I won't. But so interesting, right? Because my life now, 10 years on, looks so different. You know, at 28, I was doing my master's degree in war studies. I was in the Air Force, and I thought that, you know, that was going to be my path.
Yeah.
And here I am, 10 years later, living in Bali. I'm a coach, like how? I can imagine that. So yeah, those stories are still present, definitely. And a lot of the time I don't, because they're not my stories. Like there's nowhere to be, there's nowhere to get to in this life other than exactly where we are.
Yeah.
There are no prizes. You don't get like, you know, all of us that are like chasing the A star and like the extra medal and, you know, big tick and all the rest of it. Like, it's not coming. You know, we're not going to like to the pearly gates or whatever you think comes next and go, congratulations, Vix, you won life. But, you know, I think the question is more like, did you enjoy it? Were you present? Did you feel it? And yeah,
those are amazing questions to ask oneself. And what do your thoughts reminded me on the how's the book called, The Infinite Game, where he talks about finite and infinite games, which can be also, he predominantly relates it to business, but basically it's applied to life as well, because often when we look at life, we look at it as a finite game. So like it's a scale with a beginning and an end. where technically it's infinite, also because time is relative. So as you said, like different experiences, we experience time differently for different experiences. And what I've noticed with myself is when I at times when I truly accept, when I'm truly aligned with that notion of time is relative and my life is infinite, and what is important is for me to be here now and go through every day and just feel full, like expanded is how I would describe it the best for myself, because I've always felt closed off. And now
Mm.
I'm looking to feel more expanded and to feel all of the emotions that I can in my day-to-day life. um, I find myself worrying a lot less, getting overwhelmed a lot less, but also kind of, it's a double-edged sword for me now in these moments of practice, because the more I practice this, the more my brain screams, ah! Because it's not something that it's used to, and I'm pushing it basically outside of our comfort zone, because this is something that's completely new for us. Even
Mm.
though on a deep level, I completely align with it. That's not how I was living my life for the better majority of it.
Mm.
So now I have like those really high moments, and then with those really low moments where I question everything, and where I just think maybe I got this all wrong. Maybe I'm doing everything like, maybe, yeah, just like that big, almost like doomsday feeling of I've completely missed everything. I got everything wrong, and it's better for me to just hide under a blanket and then wait for people to forget about me and that I ever existed and that I ever did anything, because
Mm.
this isn't working. And on the rational level, like on a almost like a meta rational level, I understand that's a way for my brain to keep me safe, to not expand and not go through all of those new experiences. But it's really, really hard to kind of break through from that kind of thinking once you're in that storm.
Yeah. And but this is the point. Like, yeah. Oh, hearing you go breakthrough. I'm like, oh, your poor system. Our nervous systems are primed for safety. Like,
Hmm.
our nervous systems will always prioritize safety. But our souls crave growth. And
Yeah.
so, if we can hold both of those things as true, and one of my teachers talks about this idea of us being on our tender edge. And so, if we blow past our comfort zone, then of course we get this like equal and opposite reaction. It's physics. Like, so we bounce out and we bounce back, and what you just said, we have this like hard crash, crawl under the duvet. I don't want to live anymore kind of feeling. Whereas if
Hmm.
we in this place where we've got one foot in resource, where one foot is in that place of nervous system safety, and that we feel grounded, we feel resourced, we feel connected, and then we've got one foot that is just like it's starting to touch the edge, and our soul like naturally wants to go there. We naturally
Yeah.
want to grow,
Yeah.
and so in that gentle place, if we touch the edge, we come back and resource. We touch the edge and we come back and resource, and it's slow. Like it's way slower than the kind of like the what I definitely used to do of like blow through my edge, huge breakthroughs, and then this like huge kind of backlash.
Yeah.
We move forward slowly, but then we don't have to go back. So being on our tender edge, and it's you said this right at the start, like learning to be gentle with ourselves. Not
Hmm.
because I used to think gentle meant weak, and actually what I'm realizing now is that it's effective. Like it's this way of being gentle, of like resourcing myself, being tender with myself. It works better than the thing that I had learned to do before. It's taking it, and it still takes me like I still have to practice this all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I am able to think that I've kind of like I'm enlightened and I've like got this all figured out. I really, really don't. But I've experienced these times now of doing things differently, of doing it in this way that is tender and gentle. And for me, more of that, please.
Hmm, I love that. I've never, I've almost for, I've almost forgot about the word tender and tenderness. Now I feel kind of reminded, and I, it feels, it feels almost, it feels like I'm coming back to myself because for so long I've been, even on this journey of going kind of back and forth, it's been judging and apologizing, judging and apologizing, where kind of even that dance, even though it's a bit, even though, yeah, even though it's more positive than just the pure negative one, it's still very tiring because I'm kind of pushing myself on two different levels. And technically, it's not the apology that's needed, it's the acceptance through tenderness and through being kind to yourself and through being gentle to yourself. So thank you for reminding me of that.
You're welcome. It's such a beautiful word.
It
Like
is.
as I say it, it's like, oh, tender. Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like it's the parts of me that feel like a little vulnerable and tender and soft and
Yeah.
things. And yeah, I want to do this. I want to like hold my heart and hold my belly and kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, it's tender. I want to care
Yeah.
for
Like,
myself.
yeah. I mean, that's why it was hard for me to bring any words to my brain articulated in the first half a minute after you've said it, because I felt it everywhere on my body, and it took time for it kind of to float
Mm,
to the brain and be like, but how does it make me feel? Because it's pleasant and it's nice and it's warm and it's like giving myself a hug almost.
mm,
And yeah, just I feel it's, I don't know, it feels like a very strong word because it reminds us that basically everything is tender in a way. As in, we our experiences, our thoughts, our feelings, those are all tender, and because of that, we need to give grace to ourselves when
mm,
managing and thinking about all of these things, instead of being, yeah, like extremely negative and judgmental and dismissive, yeah, which I think may be the worst even, um,
yeah.
because as you said in the beginning of the conversation, all of those all of these situations and thoughts are completely normal human experiences, and I always say what makes them normal is because that they are human. I think that everything we go through as humans is normal because that's what makes
Mm-hmm.
us humans at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. How do we meet even the parts of ourselves, even the judgments and the self-criticism and like how do we meet that with grace and tenderness?
Yeah.
Like, that gets to come along too.
Yeah. Oh God. I think I'm my head will get stuck in that question for the rest of the day, and I'll probably, yeah, kind of journal or something about it, because
Mm,
it's it's something that we really easily, yeah, we really easily dismiss the
mm,
scenario because we're taught to cope on different ways and think
mm,
about ourselves in different ways and in different terms. So yeah, thank you for reminding all of us to be tender and gentle to ourselves. And thank you for being so open and honest about all of your experiences.
Oh, you're really welcome. Yeah, it's been a real privilege to talk about it today.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for giving up your time, especially in the stage of your month now, where I appreciate that you showed up here, recognizing that it's still the time. It's still the stage where you don't have as much as energy and everything as you do in the spring and summertime of our cycle. Then
Yeah, I have to say, I actually really enjoyed it today. I feel like a little slower, and it feels really good. It was really soft in my system to be talking about these things from this place that's still feeling a little slower rather
oh,
than like full energy. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Thank you so much, and I wish you the lovely rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much. You too. Take care.
Take care. Bye.